Good morning. I'm Sean Renee Robinson on behalf of SEED, the Center for Early Intervention on Deafness, where our mission is to maximize the communication potential of children who are deaf and hard of hearing through early education and family support. This webinar is being recorded for your convenience. If you miss any of the details, you can always catch up by visiting our YouTube channel in the future. Simply search SEED Berkeley, that's CEID Berkeley, and look for the SEED Connect playlist. All of our webinars are there. For the purpose of some housekeeping, the typical features that we have for captioning and interpreting, they will be available post-production, okay? This particular webinar is going to be a fireside chat. We have our presenter, and you'll be able to ask her questions right off the bat, and we're just going to have a lecture on siblings. So I'd like to introduce our speaker, Susan North. And would you like Susie or Susan?
Call me Susie. Thanks.
Okay, Susie North. She's been working with children and their families since completing UC Berkeley's early childhood education program in 1971. Her professional experience includes teaching and administration for Head Start, running parent-toddler programs, and directing full-day preschools. Okay. She was a master teacher in LA Unified's Parents Education Division. Most recently, she became trained in mediation and facilitation. She opened her mediation practice in 2007 and has divided her time doing conflict resolution, parent education, parent coaching, blogging, teaching school-age kids to be peer mediators, and volunteering with Southern California Family Mediation in the child dependency courts. She's the author of our subject book today, The Opposite of Combat, a parent's guide for teaching siblings how to collaborate and solve their own conflicts. So I would like to welcome our friend, Susie.
Thank you, Sean Renee, for hosting me today, and thank you to Seed for having me. I'm delighted to be here. Um, I usually begin with asking parents a question like, what concerns you about sibling conflict? What stumps you? What is difficult or frustrating about it? Do you have any sort of special concerns or reactions when your kids have conflict, as they will inevitably do?
Okay, I'm ready to ask a question.
Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask that question.
Okay, so I've got a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, and I just finished the book Siblings Without Rivalry and a bunch of other related books. So I'm trying very hard to do things right. And currently I'm I've got this complicated I don't think it's supposed to be complicated, but feels complicated when you're starting out trying different ways to do things as a parent. Like 6-step way to work through a conflict. And my challenge is sometimes when I'm in a good place, I can totally do that and help them talk through their thing, figure out what's going on, who really got hurt or what really happened. But most of the time, I'm a single parent trying to do a lot of other things at once. Um, you know, it's one of them comes up to me and it's he hit me, or this happened, and I'm just not in the place or capability to figure it out or do it. And I really would love to have some sort of quick response, especially when I'm in a stressed out state, which makes it's so irritating. And then related to that, just to complete the thought around that is, it feels like I don't really understand, even though I've been trying to figure it out and I've read about it in books and at my child's preschool. But when it really is best to intervene or stay out, um,
Mhm.
and the best way to communicate that, like, okay, go try and work it out, or go do a repair, or did you ask him for it, or and so anyway, so just kind of those quick and easy ways to deal with conflict that isn't major if that makes sense, because that's the day-to-day challenge I have. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, it makes sense. And I'm delighted to hear that you read Siblings Without Rivalry. Book is in my book as a reference. I mean, I think there are wonderful techniques in that book and others that help us raise kids in a less than rivalrous conditions. However, conflict's going to happen anyway, even if kids are not, you know, rivals to the death. They siblings are going to have conflict, so it's 100% normal. It's something humans just do. We have conflicting wishes and wants and desires that have to be worked out. I think that what you're kind of talking about, the heart of it is the difference between arbitrating and mediating. My book is about mediating. I don't ever expect parents to be able to take the time to solve every conflict through mediation. A lot of times parents have to arbitrate, which is sort of a judge and jury, umpire role, where you decide, you listen to both kids and you decide how the outcome is going to be. And that's when you put on your arbitrator hat. You're in a hurry, you're making dinner, or you're in the car and you're in a transition and you don't have time for a sit down kind of discussion. Today I'm going to be talking about mediation, which is for those times when you do have the bandwidth and the time to do it. One thing I would suggest is if there's sort of a rinse repeat quality to a certain fight that they're having or a contest, is to arbitrate now and mediate later. Like you could say, today, right now, because I'm in a hurry, we're all in a hurry, we have to get to the dentist, I'm going to decide who sits where in the car. But Sunday morning after breakfast, we're going to have a little meeting and we're going to talk about who sits where in the car, and you guys are going to work it out. Because you only mediate when you don't care about the outcome. So if you care about the outcome, for sure arbitrate. Use your authority as a parent, your mastery of things like time and money and nutrition and all the things that kids don't know anything about that you know a lot about, to just decide and say, I'm going to decide for you. So you're actually saying, I'm putting on my arbitrator hat. And then other times we'll sit down and we'll talk about it and you guys will work it out. So if it's being clear in your own mind, am I arbitrator or am I mediating? And always before you mediate, do I have the bandwidth and the time? Or could I make a time to talk about it? I hope that helps.
That was a really good answer. I'm like really interested in that. That makes so much sense to me. So when I'm hearing arbitrate means that we're going to make that decision right now. So what immediate action needs to be taken when the conflict involves hitting, biting, pushing, harmful activities? That's an arbitration move right there. Is that correct?
In a sense, I think when there's a conflict between the kids, like say they're arguing over a truck, you don't care who gets the truck. You're not, you're not uninterested, but you're disinterested. You're not an interested party in the outcome. But hitting breaks one of your rules. So this is sort of the interplay of where discipline leaves off and mediation begins. And I think when one child hits another one or pushes or shoves or pinches or whatever the heck they do because they're fighting over something, what we tend to do is discipline the misbehavior, which we should. Mm-hmm. But then we forget, there was that thing about the truck. So after you've dispensed justice, your disciplinarian hat, then you put on your mediator hat and say, well, what is, let's talk about that truck. Because I think that it leaves them working out the truck situation will leave them with the taste in their mouth that says, there's a better way to work these things out than hitting. Mm-hmm. There's actually a way to do this. When they're still excited about the truck and they still have a memory of, fighting over the truck, is a really good time to mediate if you have the time and the bandwidth to do so. Or maybe the next day or later that day. With 2-year-olds and 4-year-olds, they can't always hold the idea of a conflict for 24 hours. As your kids get older, they will be able to do that and be able to postpone a mediation and accept the fact that for right now you're just laying down the law and saying, here's what we're doing. But always think of a conflict that results in aggression as a two-parter, where the first you're the disciplinarian, and then second you're the mediator. Let's go back to the what you were fighting about and try to solve it. So it's a two-parter.
That kind of leads to like one of the questions that is in the discussion we had before,
Mhm.
when you're talking about the discipline because you're coming in as the arbitrator because you've broken one of the rules.
Mhm.
How do we avoid that's not fair?
You mean kids saying that's not fair because you decided in favor of the other one?
Well,
Like,
no,
I
that
lost the
you
contest,
actually,
so that's not fair.
yeah, so you've decided that this is what's going to happen
Right.
because of the argument or the hitting or whatever has happened. And so you've decided the
Yeah,
discipline has taken place. How do you avoid that's not fair?
that's not fair. It will always feel unfair to the loser in an arbitration is usually a win-lose outcome. A mediated outcome is usually win-win, which is why I love mediation. It doesn't, well, it's not really win-win, it's not lose, because you don't get everything you want. Obviously, you can't both get everything you want, but you were heard and you were understood and you were acknowledged. Your feelings were acknowledged. And then you worked out a problem and in the course of working out the problem, you said, well, this is hard work. This is, you know, I'm invested. This is hard work deciding who gets the truck when or how we're going to play with it together. This isn't easy. So as they absorb the idea that negotiation and working out a conflict is hard work, they also develop an appreciation for compromise.
Mm,
They're kind of living the compromise through and saying, well, I ended up with most of what I wanted, so I'm happy. Now, the whole thing of that's not fair. I mean, the more you mediate and the less you arbitrate, the less you're going to hear that's not fair. Because when they work on a solution together themselves, when you mediate, which is really stepping back, you're not using your authority to decide anything, you're not advising. I mean, a mediator doesn't advise or decide anything. A mediator is just running the meeting, basically.
okay.
When you do that more and arbitrate less, you're going to hear that's not fair a lot less, because they don't usually say that after a mediated decision because they worked it out, they hammered on it together, and they co-created it. So they're not likely to feel grumpy after a mediation as they are after when you arbitrate. After they arbitrate, the loser always feels aggrieved, and put upon. And a lot of times an arbitrated decision leaves one kid feeling vengeful and another child gloating. I won, me, I got the truck. And that's kind of a perfect setup for continued conflict,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And I saw it in small claims court when I was mediating in small claims court. You could see the neighbors leaving after the judge said, give him $50, here's your dog, do the thing. And they both, sometimes they were both grumpy with the outcome because it was an arbitrated outcome. They didn't get to work it out.
Mm.
When they went to the judge, when they went to us, the mediators, they did get to work it out. But I saw people choose not to mediate and go to the judge, and they'd walk out very grumpy. And what's it going to take for those two neighbors to have yet another dispute? Because they're
Right.
both still aggrieved and grumpy. So it's a perfect it's a solution that isn't a solution. It's just a setup for more conflict.
Does our parent have a follow-up question to that?
Yeah,
Or does
please.
that answer your question? And you can unmute yourself.
Yeah, I think that answers my question. I'm still thinking about like the specific situations I have. So let me think if there's anything. Yeah, I think it makes me really sad as a parent when I can't mediate, and
Mhm.
I wish there was a way to. I know there like isn't really a quick fix, but
No.
I wish there was a way, like some lines that occasionally work are do a repair when I have very little time and I just want to say something, because sometimes that works because I've taught my kids how to do a repair.
Mhm.
Or if I say, what's another example? Like something that encourages them to go back and talk about it instead, go and ask me. Like a lot of times that works. So I guess I'm just thinking about how can I have more of those quick wins,
Yeah.
moments? Yeah, instead of yeah, picking a winner and a loser, or
Right.
yeah. So I guess that's the follow-up question.
And I would say with 2 and 4, I'm so glad you're starting this young. This is a lot for a 2-year-old and a 4, especially the 2-year-old. It's a lot, but it will get easier as they. And when you start doing it when they're 14 and 16, it's very different because they're just rookies and everybody's a rookie and it's just so hard. But with starting early, they will get the rhythm of it. They will come to see that it's the best kind of outcome for everybody. That a lot of times, they are playmates. A lot of times an arbitrated decision means one gets the truck and the other's so mad they don't even want to play. So a mediated decision means that you preserve the relationship too. Like now I have part ownership of the truck and I have someone to play with. So you haven't made a decision that's at the expense of the relationship. You're actually buttressing the relationship. And they start to see that. I mean, not that they would say that in so many words, but they start to appreciate the value of honing their relationship and buttressing their relationship, strengthening it.
I like how you talk about how you keep the relationship together and one gets the truck and the other one gets someone to play with. So in many families, we grow up teaching our children, oh, you have to share. You have to share. This is important. Sharing is important. But how important is it for a child or children to have their own personal space or their own favorite? That's their favorite toy. No one else plays with it. How important is it to have something of your own where it's just you?
Yeah. I had a mom in one of my parent education classes who came from a gigantic family. She said there was no money. And she said, my parents used to always give us a gift. I mean, it was very sexist. The 4 boys got something to share, and the 3 girls got something to share. It was very gendered, which would no longer fly. But the idea was that all the kids were given a gift that they could only play, like a toy stove, and it was theirs. But built into that toy and the use of it was some compromise and negotiation.
Mhm.
It wasn't meant to be used one at a time, and I thought that was a very interesting approach to having a lot of kids and no money. And I love the idea of toys that are joint, especially when they're close in age. You know, um, that the gap when there's a newborn and a 2-year-old is vast, but when you have a 7 and a 9-year-old, there's going to be a lot of things they will enjoy together at the same time. I do feel that everybody's entitled to have some things that are just theirs. A couple of things that they're designated, like they're lovey.
Mhm.
You don't want to be having the kid dragging their lovey all over, their special stuffy that they're crazy about, or their blanket or something like that. Most of the stuff in the household is meant to be shared, like I don't have my special spatula that no one else can touch. So, I think most of it should be used, but working out how they're going to share it is the whole kind of mediation piece. As far as making kids share, like someone's playing with something and someone else wants it, they immediately have to relinquish it, doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, I think they should work it out. Like maybe I need it for 5 more minutes, or can you have it? Can you have it all day tomorrow? Or
Mhm.
whatever works for them. I think a lot of times we praise children for sharing when someone has shaken them down. You know, like a child is playing with a toy and another kind of looms. I've seen this in the nursery school classroom all the time, where another child kind of comes up and looms over them and sort of power on them. And the one who's playing with the toy will sort of sheepishly give it up. And the teacher will say, "Oh, thank you, Cecily, for sharing. That was so nice of you." And I'm thinking, that's like someone stealing my purse in an alley, and my friend saying, "That was so nice of you to give that man your purse. That was so kind." What? You know, it's not sharing, it's a shakedown. And I think some kids need to be taught to hang on to that thing a little bit and not just relinquish. And other kids need to learn to wait, till a goodly amount of time has passed. So I'm not into forced sharing at all. Um, I think sharing, the best kind of sharing, comes from the heart much later than we wish. It's usually around 5 or 6 or even more, where they really want to share. They want to enjoy the pleasure of dividing their cookie and sharing it with somebody, but that takes a long time for that much empathy to kick in. And people start teaching kids to share at 2 and 3, and I just don't think that's really sharing. And I think in a way it may spoil the pleasure of sharing later when it would have come to them from the inside out. And that really worries me, that so much forced sharing deprives them of the joy of actual heartfelt sharing. Because sharing is like, sharing is for suckers. Sharing is what you have to do. And I want that person to grow up to be somebody who'll write a check to United Way, feel good about it, feel happy and generous and pleased that they're doing this, not like it's a shakedown.
That makes a lot of sense. Here at Seed, we have kids who are just learning play skills. And so I see in our classrooms a lot of the time where you will see a kid looming, right? But they don't really know
How to ask.
to ask.
Yeah.
So how do you feel about learning to share by learning to ask to share?
Absolutely. I'd say, Otis, it looks like you really want Cecily's, you're looking at Cecily playing with the beads and you look really interested. Do you want to ask her for a turn? And then, can I have a turn with the beads? And Cecily looks like, you say, well, Cecily, it looks like you're really having fun and maybe you'd like to wait a while. But, the beads do kind of belong to all of us. So at some point, it's a good idea to let him have a turn too. Because, you as a teacher can arbitrate and say, the beads belong to all of us, right? Nobody has in the classroom, everything is everybody's. I don't know how many times I said to kids, the chairs belong to all of us, and right now he's using that chair, because the kid will go play and come back and, that's my chair, The chairs belong to all of us. Right now he's using it. But a classroom's so different from a family, in terms of how much authority you want to wield. And in a family, some things do actually belong to people, and as opposed to a classroom where it's all community stuff.
You mentioned previously in the last answer what about how this large family with no money, they gave like toys for the boys and toys for the girls, and that was for them to play with. How about how do your rules how do your rules figure into the sexes? So are there 2 sets of rules?
I would say no. I tried to raise my kids in a terms of like sort of gender blind way, as far as who was expected to do what, or the chores, or I think I probably unconsciously, because of when I was raised in the 50s, so I had some probably vestigial ideas about like boys ought to take out the trash and girls should help with the dishes. But I think we were conscious of trying to raise them with chores and rules that were not gender specific. And their father and I modeled that in the home, what we did, our chores, our duties,
Let me do another question, unless you want to continue with that train of thought. No, we're good.
That's
All
fine.
right. So how important is understanding your child's temperament? For example, how do you set limits for a strong-willed child versus your mild-tempered child, where you have that kid who, he is looming over me, I'll just give it to him.
Yeah.
And you have firm and soft limits, and can they coexist?
I don't think I would have firm limits for one and soft limits for the other. I think when we talked about that question yesterday, you and I it reminded me how, mediation doesn't turn lions into lambs, and it doesn't turn lambs into lions. But we talk a lot about power balancing, and when you say to some kids, so work it out, go to your room, you have a 10-year-old and a 13-year-old, and you send them to their room to work it out. Their liabilities of temperament, because we all have liabilities of temperament, will rule the day pretty much. And it could be the younger child who's the stronger, or the more persistent, or louder, to the point where the 13-year-old finally just says, oh, for crying out loud, take the whatever, I don't care anymore, just take it. And that touches on the whole let them work it out thing. Letting them work it out, I think, ingrains patterns of a strong-willed, persistent kid getting their way, and a more easygoing kid learning to be the giver-upper. And as I said, you're not going to change their essential temperament, but I think that the persistent, strong-willed child needs to learn skills of listening and respecting other viewpoints and negotiating, and the value of all those things. Because a strong-willed kid would be a great leader someday, but not if they can't listen or acknowledge or compromise, or they're just going to be a bully. A strong-willed kid, it's great to have that strength of character. And if they're charismatic and they make a good leader, that's great, but let's build in those other skills of listening and sharing credit, which is a wonderful quality in a leader, not just being, it's all about the me show, And I want that mild-mannered kid to have the experience of being respected for what their wishes and wants, and learning to stand their ground. They might not always use that skill because they're easygoing and they don't, as an adult, some people just don't care where we go to dinner, like 6 people are just trying to pick a restaurant, and there's always a couple of people who are like, let's go to, no, let's go. And a few people who go, let's just meet somewhere, I don't care, And I tend to be the person who doesn't care where we eat, right? Let them work it out. But if a push comes to shove, I still have the skills to stand my ground when it matters, In those times in my life where I really need to take a stand, I don't have to be a wallflower, or weakling. I can make my feelings known.
So is this something that parents have to be vested in learning about their child to understand their temperament?
Yeah.
And knowing that they do have those opposites. This is where that mediation comes in, where
Yeah.
you can, how do you help them, that strong-willed one and the mild temperamented child, come together, and how do you mediate between them so that one
Right.
doesn't run over the other one and this one
Right.
learns those? How do you do that?
Well, it provides structure. I'll I'll talk just briefly about, now Mika mentioned something about 6 steps, and I'm fascinated because oddly enough I have 6 steps. The reason I came up with the idea, the opposite of combat, is because I came up with a mnemonic device to help in the heat of battle when you're tense and everybody's yelling and it's a lot. It helps to have a mnemonic device to kind of guide you through. And mine is talk, acknowledge, brainstorm, mull over, organize, and contract. Those are my steps in mediation. I didn't make up the steps in mediation. I just framed them this way to make it kind of easy to grasp and to remember. Mediation is an age-old practice, and these are the things that work. Okay, so talk, they each say their position. Acknowledge is really important. A talks and B says what A said, and that's really hard. It's really hard to say without a lot of rebuttal and editorializing what the other one said, and you have to really sit on them hard not to go off on a tangent. No, what did Robbie say? How was he feeling, and what made him feel that way? So it's really an I message. It's boiling down what child A said as an I message. I felt insulted when you called me a poopy head. And you might have to give them the words and help them with a lot of that, especially emotion words. And then B speaks, and A has to acknowledge what B said. And that's hard. Again, it's hard not to say, well, he said I was being rude, but on the other hand, I didn't go off on a whole thing. No. What did he say? What did he say? And once they have both talked and felt acknowledged, you can usually feel the steam lowering. You can usually feel a shift, because they both really got to say what they feel, and they both really got to be heard, and each demonstrated to the other that, I hear you, I heard what you said. It's also kind of a magical thing to be able to acknowledge with an active listening piece, which is sort of an iMessage turned on its head. It sounds like you were really insulted when I called you a poopy head. That's active listening. That's acknowledging. Once they've actually heard those things, they calm down and they're ready to get to work because they feel heard. So then the next step is to brainstorm. Well, let's think of some ways we can solve this. What do you think we should do? And brainstorming, there should be no commentary. Brainstorming is freewheeling and creative. And so if you start letting them critique each other's ideas, it shuts down the creativity. It should be very freewheeling. No ideas too crazy. And you write them all down, or you list them, or you make a picture of them, or you just remember them if you can do that. And then they mull over. That's the M part of combat. Now they get to negotiate and say, well, I don't like your idea because you said you get it. You said I get it on Mondays. I get to sit up front on the car on Mondays, but a lot of Mondays we have vacations. So, days off from school. So I would be, so they get to pick at it. Organize is the stage where you're sort of saying, okay, so it sounds like we have, these ideas, and you've worked on this, and you're the secretary. You're sort of getting it all pulled together and making sure that they understand what they've agreed to. And then the last stage is contract. Like, do you agree? They can shake hands, they can hug, they can, whatever they feel like doing. I would never make them hug. They can sign something and put it on the fridge, it's a contract. Or just agree to agree, or agree to disagree, wherever it leads them. Not every mediation is tied up in a nice pink bow, like sometimes it fizzles, or they just run out of steam, and that's okay, but they've communicated, they've practiced some really valuable communication skills. So that's a win in my book. It doesn't have to have a perfect ending, So that's kind of just the rundown. Now I'm forgetting your question. Oh dear.
That actually answered the question. It was, how do you do that?
Oh yeah, and that's the power balancing. Like, whoop, he didn't. We're not there yet. Don't go off on a. Just answer the question. We're going to have time for you to tell your feelings about the situation. I wouldn't say your side of the story, because that's very polarizing. Like, two sides. There probably are two sides, but don't need to amplify that. Tell us how this has worked for you. What is your take on this, or how did you experience the whole thing? Mediation is all about asking good questions, open-ended questions, big enough to drive a truck through. You don't really have an outcome in mind. They might come up with a solution you would never think of in a million years, or they might come up with exactly what you would have come up with let's share it. Let's play with it together, or I get it for 5 minutes and you get it for 5 minutes, which is fine, but there's a lot of strength and beauty in them coming up with that idea rather than it being your idea. If they work it through and they come up with a conventional form of a resolution that you're thinking, God, I could have thought of that 20 minutes ago. There's still value in the fact that they hammered it out.
Okay. When you have those skills and you're teaching your children, what happens when there's a language barrier, when there's an age difference? We have a child who doesn't have the language to understand those
Right.
negotiation skills, those mulling over skills. What do you do when there's a 2-year-old pulling the hair of your 12-year-old?
Yeah.
What do we do
The
then?
2-year-old is probably pulling the hair of the 12-year-old because there was something going on for them beforehand. So I would discipline the 2-year-old, which to me means a serious talk, and maybe ask the 12-year-old, because there's something I can get you, if in the case of, their child bites their brother, you get him an ice pack, making some kind of remedy. But I would go back to what they were fighting over. And if they were fighting, and I have a 2-year-old and a 12-year-old, that's a big gap. And by the way, close in age siblings are much more conflict prone than far away siblings, just saying, because they're in the same sphere a 12-year-old and a 2-year-old have a different social life, they have different interests, they have different possessions that aren't interesting to the other, So there's going to be less, but you can always power balance. I mean, that's the beauty of mediation, is the power balancing piece. You aren't mediating if you're not power balancing. And that might giving one of them some vocabulary or looking at their face. If it's a toddler and a 4-year-old who isn't really speaking, you say, you look really angry right now. I think you were really angry because he grabbed that doll. And then you can say from the toddler's face, like, yeah, you got it, or no. So you're reading their indications and helping the other read them as you do so. Yes, you definitely have to be power balancing throughout. I always think of it like maybe one kid is more expressive, more florid in the way they talk, or, they can sound so aggrieved, and the other one will just say, yeah, I was mad. And you can see, I would, as a mediator, if I saw that one just said, I'm mad, but you could see that they're more than just mad, I would say, you know what? You were seething. You were furious. I could see the look in your eye and on your face that you were absolutely furious. So you're really helping the kids write their emotions in the same font.
So what I hear you saying is that when you have that younger child and they're really not knowledgeable of those feelings or those words, we need to narrate that for them.
Oh, there's a lot of
so that they understand what it is that's happening to them.
Right.
And also at the same time, while you're narrating for them, it feels like we're giving the older child, we're helping them acknowledge how that other younger
exactly
feels.
You're giving them a lens. You're providing the older one, maybe the more emotionally intelligent one, who could be the younger one. If you're helping somebody to express themselves, you are helping the other one read that kid better. Yeah, you are. You're sort of like broadcasting what you're seeing. Like when I say to a 15-year-old, he's arguing with his 12-year-old little sister, and you say, you were furious. I could see from you were really angry. And the 12-year-old's going, oh, really? I wasn't noticing that. He was really, really mad.
And how do you avoid, I think we've asked this question again, but I'm going to go back to the 2-year-old or the 4-year-old who, in my experience, if they're pulling their sister's hair or their brother's, notebooks or computers or whatever, they just want attention. How do we use language that allows this one to come down from their 12-year-old high horse and this one to come up and understand, oh, it's time for them to, do their homework, or, that there's a separation. How do we prepare both of them to know that they need time apart and that it's not time to play right now?
Right. I think that's something that could be worked out in a mediation, that the younger one could say, I think you were poking him and prodding him because, and this is just a guess. And when I'm reading another child, I always make it sound, when I'm reading any other person, an adult or a child, I would never say, you're angry. I would say, it looks to me like, or I'm wondering if, give them some wiggle room, because this is just a best guess. This is just me using whatever I've got in terms of emotional intelligence to read you, So I'd always frame it as a maybe or a I'm wondering if, could it be? I think I would say about the kid who was hassling the older one, did you just want him to play with you? It looked like maybe you just were bored and wanted somebody to play with. And the older one says, I'm doing my homework, I just don't have time. Then that would be part of the mediation, was that this one really does have this very important work to do. And then you'd help him explain that to the other one, rather than just calling him names for being a pest, which would be the knee jerk where you get away, you're such a pest, and another really interesting thing is to look at your role in the family you grew up in. It's something to really think about as a mediator, because are you siding with the child who holds the position you held in the family? If you were the youngest one, it's really easy to see the older one as being a bully. And if you were the oldest one, it's really easy to see the younger one as a pest. But you have to have the big view. So it's really good to just, sort of examine your own spot. If you came from a family of more than one child, to think about your role and how you might have inclinations toward one child or another for various reasons. Temperament could be temperament, or could be their position in the family that's kind of guiding you, or getting you off course.
Yeah.
In the
Taking
case,
away our own bias of how we feel
yeah, it can create a bias. It can
and
create
then
a bias.
allowing them to figure things out and or just
Mhm.
give them information
Right,
and let
right,
them kind of create their own bias, I guess.
right. Because they're going to grow up
Because
with,
they're going to grow up and have their own. Right.
absolutely. They're stuck in that,
So
they're
we
definitely.
have a couple of minutes left. Is there anything that you really want the families to know about the opposite of of that combat? How
Mhm.
what are some key ingredients that you want to leave them with?
One key thing is a rich use of emotion words, from early. Oh, that's really disappointing. You look so frustrated. It's funny. I when I teach preschool parents, um, I will ask them, how many of your kids know 10 farmyard animals? All the hands go up. All the kids know. They're 10 or 12. And the sounds they make, which is great. I'm not against it. I'm all for it. It's cute. It's fun. But how many 4-year-olds know the words for 10 or 12 emotions?
Mm-hmm.
And all the hands go down. Because, and those, how often do they have to interact with the sheep? Not very often. But how often do they meet with frustration, discouragement, joy, disappointment? These are like familiar feelings, but they have names. And we should be using those names, because the sooner your child can connect with those names of feelings, the better they can express themselves to you and to their siblings and to the world, you
Mm-hmm.
know. Um, and it also, knowing those words creates a bridge of understanding to other kids. It really is empathy building as well, because if I know what it feels like to be disappointed, and that word has been attached to that horrible feeling that we have from time to time, then when a teacher tells me that somebody else is disappointed, I go, ooh, yeah, I feel you. I know what that feels like. And I have a frame of reference about what disappointment feels like. So, those words are great for self-expression, but they're also great for empathy building.
That's great. Are there any more questions before we wrap this up? I'm looking in the box. I'm looking on the side. Nothing.
I usually like to wrap up by just reading like the very last part of the book, because it's sort of when I
Absolutely.
do book readings and stuff. Is that okay?
Yes,
Can I do that?
absolutely.
So in my final part of the book, I talk about a friend of mine who said peace is a garden. And then I say, she really knows what she's talking about. I'm so grateful for this metaphor. Like gardening, making peace is serious, grubby, challenging work. Like gardening, it provides satisfaction and yields long-reaching rewards. And like gardening, it's never done. Let's imagine you spend the day working in a garden. You harvest vegetables, pull weeds, haul dirt, dig holes, sow seeds, move plants, tidy flower beds, and sprinkle water. Afterwards, you shower and make yourself a big glass of iced tea. You plop down in a comfortable chair and enjoy the vista, an inviting, well-groomed, lovely-hued garden. Which of these activities is gardening? The day's work or the late afternoon interlude? It's the work, of course. Once again, I encourage you to think of peace not just as the absence of conflict, but rather as the work of dealing with conflict. I also encourage you to think about the impact mediation can have on your child and the community. Conflict is here to stay, but peaceful conflict resolution builds character, promotes harmonious relationships, and makes the world a better place. To appreciate this, all you have to do is recall a special friend, roommate, coworker, neighbor, team member, boss, or romantic partner who recognized relational tension and addressed it in a respectful and timely way. This is someone who came to you early in a conflict to talk things out and who received your overtures at resolution with grace, optimism, and a goodwill effort. When you mediate your children's dispute, you're in fact guiding your child toward becoming that kind of person. I can think of no higher calling than raising conflict-competent kids. What excellent friends, roommates, colleagues, spouses, parents, community members, and citizens of the world they will be. I don't believe it's overstating the case to say that if you equip your children with the tools to resolve conflict skillfully, you will advance the cause of peace in a concrete and powerful way. You have my admiration and support. You are a peacemaker.
That was beautiful. I like that.
Thank you.
The imagery of being in the garden and the peace.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
it's
that it's the
beautiful.
work.
Yeah.
Peace,
And
okay, peace
and
is such
knowing that
hard
you
work,
can't get the garden without the work.
and peace is such hard work, it should be a verb. Peace is the work. It isn't like that wonderful day at the beach where everything was great and nobody fought. That's a snapshot, right?
Yes.
It's the work. Peace is the work.
Well, I would like to thank you, Susie, for coming and bringing this wonderful work to us.
Thank
I
you.
think it's going to fall on some parents and give them some guidance on how to negotiate or mediate with their children. We've heard that basically we need to use language, we need to use those emotion words, and we need to step back sometimes,
Mhm.
give them the words, and let them do it themselves so that there's no winner or loser, but there's more so um, mutual satisfaction without a win.
That's a perfect description of a peaceful conflict resolution, mutual satisfaction without a win.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
love it. I always roll my eyes when people say win-win, because like
Yeah. Nobody really wins.
not lose, not lose.
Not lose, not lose. That should be, we should make that a bumper sticker. Not lose, not lose. That would be a great thing. So, on behalf of Seed, I would like to thank you for coming and just sharing your work with us. I think it's
My
really going
pleasure.
to do some wonders to some of our student body. I also want to thank our people who popped in to visit and take in some of the work. Again, you will see this post production on our YouTube page. I sincerely appreciate your presence, and I hope that the content will enrich your knowledge base. It'll increase your ability to offer language rich environments and maximize your communication in your family. So, thank you everyone for attending, and I appreciate you. Have a good day,
Thank
everyone.
you. Thank you.
All right. Okie dokie. So we'll stop this.